We often picture medieval food as either extravagant noble feasts or bland peasant food, but the real diet of medieval peasants might surprise you. It was healthier than you'd expect. In this video, we will uncover what peasants actually ate during the Middle Ages. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe, and while you are there, leave a comment and let us know what other historical topics you would like to hear about next. Life for a peasant during the Middle Ages was not always as primitive and crude as often depicted, but life at the time was governed by the feudal system. Forests in medieval Europe were often owned by nobility and were subject to strict laws that preserved hunting rights for the elite. These laws banned peasants from hunting, and they could only use the forest for foraging and collecting resources, such as wood and berries, under specific conditions. Instead, peasant families typically kept various animals like chicken, pigs, and cows, which were crucial to their subsistence. These animals were integral to the peasant economy, providing food and labor, in the case of oxen and horses. The cornerstone of the peasant diet was bread made from the flour of various grains. Depending on the region and what was available, this could be rye, barley, oats, or wheat. Wheat was the preferred grain because it makes lighter, more palatable bread, but it was more expensive and less common. Without personal ovens, most people relied on communal ovens to bake their bread, which was predominantly coarse and made from whole grains, since producing white flour was more labor-intensive and wasteful. Another cornerstone of the medieval peasant's diet was pottage or porridge, and maybe what most people associate when they think of the diet of a medieval peasant. This dish was made by boiling grains until soft and mushy. Sometimes it also included herbs, spices, vegetables, legumes, and occasionally meat or fish, to improve both taste and nutritional value. Vegetables such as cabbages, chard, onions, garlic, and carrots were also staples, eaten as side dishes, if not added to pottage. Pigs were a favored choice among livestock, as they could forage for their own food, and would eat leftovers humans don't eat. Chickens were another favorite, as they also could forage for their own food and required minimal maintenance, providing a valuable source of protein through their meat and eggs. Their small size also made them easier to sustain through winters. Fish played a crucial role in the diet, particularly due to Christian restrictions on eating meat on certain days and during Lent. Fishing rights were subject to the Lord's permission, though peasants living by the sea could fish freely. Fish such as mackerel, eels, cod, and preserved forms like salted fish and pickled herring were staples, with roasted eel regarded as a delicacy. Beans and peas rich in protein were staples in the peasant diet. Easily stored in their dried form, they were used throughout the year, providing an essential source of nutrients, particularly during the winter months. The diet was supplemented by a variety of other sources when available. Fruits were commonly consumed raw or cooked, often featured in desserts or used to make beverages such as wine and cider. Wild mushrooms and berries like raspberries, strawberries, and blueberries were foraged, and nuts such as hazelnuts, walnuts, and chestnuts were collected. Depending on the season and region, peasants collected foraged greens like nettles, dandelions, and other wild plants, incorporating them into their meals for added nutrition. Honey was the predominant sweetener, with beekeeping an important practice for producing honey and beeswax for candles. In regions like Scandinavia, England, and parts of Eastern Europe, honey was also used to brew mead for special occasions. Some peasants kept geese even though they were more expensive to buy than chickens. They were valued not only for their meat, but also for their fat, down for pillows, and feathers for arrows. In coastal areas, seafood like lobster, crab, crayfish, clams, oysters, mussels, squid, eel, and even seals were part of the diet. They also ate more exotic meats like beaver, considered fish due to its fish-like tail, and a variety of birds and their eggs, including swans, sparrows, herons, and cranes, were sometimes consumed. Although often reserved for the elite, many of these finer meats occasionally found their way to peasant tables. Even though not everyone had the means to be able to maintain livestock, excavations and other clues show that meat was able to be bought for reasonable prices, supplementing what they could not grow or raise themselves with items purchased or bartered from street vendors, markets, or wandering fishmongers. In towns, prepared meals could be bought from cooks like pie makers and roasters. While the medieval diet was primarily based on what could be grown, raised, or foraged locally, it was supplemented by a range of other foods, demonstrating a diet that was more varied than often assumed. But as their diets were largely limited to what was available locally and seasonally, it often became much simpler during the winter months without much variety. To cope with seasonal changes and ensure food availability throughout the year, medieval peasants employed various preservation techniques. They smoked, dried, pickled in vinegar, candied, or packed food in gelatin or fat. During winter, meat could also be preserved by freezing. Due to a lack of resources to produce sufficient fodder for their livestock during winter, peasants typically butchered much of their livestock in late fall. Only a few animals were spared, kept mainly for breeding purposes. This strategy was crucial for managing food resources and ensuring survival through the harsher months. In addition to meat preservation, medieval peasants dried various fruits such as pears, apples, peaches, cherries, and prunes, which helped sustain them during the long, fruitless winters. Herbs were a year-round staple in peasant diets, thanks to drying techniques. Common herbs like parsley, sage, and rosemary were grown in kitchen gardens and used extensively to season and improve the palatability of dishes, as foods preserved by salting or drying often lost much of their taste when rehydrated and cooked, so herbs and spices were essential for enhancing flavor. In the Middle Ages, ale and beer were the beverages of choice, due largely to the challenges of securing clean drinking water. The brewing process involved boiling, which helped eliminate harmful bacteria, making these drinks safer than water. These beverages were typically less alcoholic than modern versions, but were crucial for providing both hydration and calories. Historical records indicate that there were regulations specifying the daily rations of beer for certain types of workers, underscoring its importance in daily life and labor. In regions favorable to growing grapes such as France, Spain, and Italy, wine was common. While milk from cows, sheep, and goats was consumed, it posed challenges as it spoiled quickly without refrigeration and carried risks of transmitting diseases like tuberculosis. To mitigate these risks and extend the shelf life of dairy, milk was often processed into butter and cheese. These dairy products were safer, more durable, and formed an essential part of the medieval diet. Access to clean water varied greatly. In regions where uncontaminated water sources were available, water was commonly consumed. Christianity exerted a significant influence on dietary habits during the Middle Ages, dictating not only what people could eat, but also when they could eat it. Adherence to the Church's dietary rules was viewed as a way to ensure one's place in heaven, reflecting the deep relationship between daily life and religious beliefs. One of the most prominent and rigorous of these periods was Lent, the 40 days leading up to Easter. During Lent, Christians were expected to practice fasting and abstain from certain luxuries as a form of penitence. The Church mandated that during Lent, as well as on other specific days such as Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, the consumption of meat from four-legged animals and fowl was prohibited. This restriction also extended to products derived from these animals, such as eggs, cheese, and milk. The Church also designated specific feast days and periods of abstinence throughout the year to commemorate various events in the life of Christ and the saints, further integrating these dietary restrictions into the fabric of medieval Christian life. The medieval peasant diet, though limited in variety compared to modern diets, was robust in some ways, and healthier in terms of being largely composed of whole foods and lower intake of sugar and processed food. But the medieval diet would likely have lacked some of the diversity and nutritional balance provided by modern diets. Thank you for tuning into this episode. I hope you liked it. If you like our content, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts on topics you are interested in for future videos. Thanks for watching.